Why hello there, and welcome back to Tabletop Ferox Post-Mortem, where I dig up the festering remains of a long-dead tabletop role-playing game and poke at its rotten entrails with a stick. And the game whose carcass I will be picking apart today is Street Fighter the Storytelling Game. A game that very much exists, and if you want all of the basic information on, I did a whole review which I highly recommend. It's got graphics and everything. But the overall takeaway from which is a tabletop role-playing game based on Street Fighter from the same publisher and using the same system as Vampire the Masquerade sounds like something that would only be notable for the absurdity of its existence, but is actually really good. And it also happens to be my current game that people are getting tired of hearing me talk about, which is why I'm doing a second video about it. And if you have not watched my first video on the topic, you might want to do so, as I will be referencing specific game concepts and content types that might not make sense without context. But if you'd rather not, the two most important concepts to understand for this video are that every character has a fighting style which provides a list of moves they can buy with power points, and those moves are called maneuvers and are the core mechanical element of the combat system. So, the story begins in 1994, and since it begins in 1994, I unfortunately do not have as much in the way of reliable information regarding exact release dates as I usually do, as I do rely quite a bit on archived websites when researching games from the 2000s and later. So I am working with the information I was able to find, which may or may not be accurate. So we start in June 1994 with the release of the Street Fighter the Storytelling Game Core Rulebook. Hey, it's June 2024 right now, which means happy 30th anniversary, Street Fighter the Storytelling Game! Anyway, the core rulebook is a 184-page softcover containing White Wolf's interpretation of the Street Fighter universe. Keep in mind that it is mid-1994. Super Street Fighter II Turbo has just been released, so they didn't really have a lot to go on in terms of story, and reportedly very little restrictions from Capcom. A somewhat simplified version of the basic storyteller rules with a selection of 6 talents, skills, and knowledges, and 10 backgrounds, all of which are fairly unimpressive. And then of course, the incredibly elegant, still to this day largely unchallenged combat system, with 6 basic techniques, 10 fighting styles, +1, with 3 basic punch and kick maneuvers, plus basic block, movement, and grab maneuvers, 17 punch maneuvers, +4, 20 kick maneuvers, 7 block maneuvers, 20 grab maneuvers, +1, 14 athletics maneuvers, +1, including jump. Once again, yes, you must spend points for the ability to jump, and 23 focus maneuvers. As well as 8 weapon techniques with stats for 7 melee weapons, 5 firearms, 3 heavy weapons, and a sharpened throwing hat. Yeah, I suggested in my review that they may have taken a wee bit of influence from Mortal Kombat, and I'm just saying that Mortal Kombat 2 came out in 1993. Then characters, and okay, this one is going to require a little more explanation. Characters have 9 attributes in 3 categories that start at 1, and then you must assign 7, 5, and 3 points to spend on each of those categories. Technically, you could add up to 3 more points to any attribute with freebie points, but cannot exceed 5 points total in any attribute. But then, if we look at the actual Street Fighter characters presented in this book, they are significantly above that level. For example, Zangief has a strength and stamina of 7, as well as 25 points in techniques, whereas player characters start with 8. Also, every Street Fighter character has 20 health, whereas a player character starts with 10. And yeah, player characters can advance to such power levels by earning and spending large amounts of experience points to up their stats, but overall these characters are significantly overpowered to the point where there's not really much you can do with them in the game. beyond just picking a couple of them and having a quick fight. Anyway, this book provides stats for all 12 non-boss world warriors of Super Street Fighter II, as well as 4 pre-made characters who are actually at player character level, and 11 minions, which are usually less powerful characters, but not always, and just to make life easy on myself, any unnamed character presented in this condensed character sheet, I am going to count as a minion. As well as an introductory adventure where the final boss is Balrog. I prefer the original or international names, but for the sake of the audience and because that's what the book uses, I will call Mike Bison Balrog. And that's why I keep saying plus whatever. Balrog, the boxing style, and a handful of maneuvers are all presented at the end of this adventure, making them things that players might have trouble finding, considering that the rest of the book is, let's just say, less than totally consistent about whether or not that content is actually in the book. And when I say he's the final boss, I mean he is the last person fought in the adventure. The player characters don't actually fight him. Guile does, with the book suggesting that the players collaboratively control Guile. Because, as I made a point of earlier, the Street Fighter characters presented in this book are incredibly overpowered. Too overpowered to be fought by a group of low-level characters. Balrog's punches average 6 to 7 damage, and can very reasonably deal 10 or more damage to a starting character in a single attack. For comparison, if you super stacked your punches, put 5 points in strength, 5 points in punch, and took some of the same moves, you could average 3 to 4 damage against him, and he has 20 health. Also, I can't help but feel like letting the players temporarily take on the role of culturally accurate American William Freedom Fries Guile is a thing that sounds neat on paper, but would just make your characters feel even more underpowered by comparison. Anyway, in addition to Balrog, the adventure also contains 1 additional minion, 1 additional fighter who is the closest thing to an actual boss that the adventure has, and 2 other characters, which is my catch-all category for characters who aren't really designed for fighting. There's also a map for the adventure and some standees, and I should point out that extras like these, character sheets, combat cards, etc., are not being counted in the page count, which is why some of them might seem a little odd, but my reasoning will be explained in the next one. And that is it for the core rulebook, and next, a couple that I have no dates for, aside from the fact that they definitely did not come out before the core rulebook, or after the next one that I do have a date for, so sometime in the second half of 1994, Secrets of Shadowloo. A 76-page softcover which provides information on Shadowloo and M. Bison's secret island stronghold, which is of course all non-canonical by today's standards. Hey, you know, if M. Bison the Boxer is short for Mike Bison, does that mean that M. Bison the Dictator is also Mike Bison? Is his name Mike? Mikey B to his friends? It also provides stats for M. Bison, Vega, and Sagat, as well as their respective styles, L'Erdrit, Spanish Ninjutsu, and Thai kickboxing. And it's probably worth noting that Balrog was almost certainly supposed to be included in this book and was thrown in the core book at the last minute, as evidenced by how poorly the boxing style was integrated into the core rulebook. And then for those new styles, 2 new punch maneuvers, 3 new kick maneuvers, 2 new grab maneuvers, 4 new athletics maneuvers, and 6 new focus maneuvers. Plus weapon stats for the claw, because, you know, Spanish ninjutsu, they use a claw, it's a thing. And just because I love making fun of White Wolf's poor editing, Vega's dots and claw technique are added to his damage rolls. Vega does not have any dots in claw technique. Then 2 of Bison's evil street fighting teams with 5 and 4 fighters and 1 manager type character each, who are actually more or less of an appropriate level for player characters to fight. As well as 7 minions, including most notably a giant squid and elite robot, along with variant stats for frogmen and rules for fighting underwater, and forklifts. And honestly, I don't know what's more amusing, that they felt the need to stat up a giant squid, or that they felt the need to give a group of NPCs ranks in drive forklift, and then provide rules for forklifts just in case those NPCs decided to try to run you over with a forklift. I'm just kidding. The forklift thing is obviously way more amusing. Like, there is one vehicle covered in Street Fighter the Storytelling game, and it is forklift. Then there is one new knowledge, science, some story hooks for Shadowloo Adventures, and a Shadowloo Adventure, intended for beginning or slightly experienced Street Fighter characters, focused around Vega and his Spanish Ninja, which features 3 additional characters, but much like Balrog, while Vega is involved in the adventure, the actual boss is a giant mutant bull. Listen, being weird is part of this game's charm. Although you actually can fight Vega. At one point it is specified that if the characters refuse to surrender, Vega will just jump in and wipe out the entire party. Then some standees, including the elite robot, but unfortunately not the giant squid or forklift, and possibly maps. Here's the thing. These books have been out of print for 30 years and carry the name of a popular video game, and as such, lead a lot of people on the secondhand market to assume that they are worth significantly more than they actually are. So I am working from scans of books from the internet that may or may not be complete when it comes to these removable elements. Like, the adventure does tell you to use 2 specific hex maps, but also, this is White Wolf, so directly referencing a piece of content is not exactly proof that said content actually exists. So I'm just going to keep mentioning what I have and letting you know that there might be some things missing. And then also at some point in the second half of 1994, Street Fighter Storyteller Screen, which is a 4-panel GM screen with, the normal stuff, and then also stats for all of the maneuvers from the previous 2 books, which I guess could be convenient in certain situations. But more importantly, it came packaged with Shades of Grey, a 16-page booklet containing a short adventure for novice to intermediate Street Fighters, but also 3 new punch maneuvers, 1 new kick maneuver, and 2 new grab maneuvers. Plus 2 new talents, 3 new skills, and 2 new knowledges, as well as 3 Street Fighters who serve as the bosses of the encounter, who do seem defeatable, but a substantial challenge for even an intermediate team, and 2 other characters who are the primary antagonist, but not really in a fist-punchy way. And I don't normally cover magazine articles in these videos, but let's be honest, I need to take whatever I can with this one. So, December 1994, White Wolf in Phobia, aka White Wolf Magazine, featuring the article Best of the Best, which details 3 very overpowered assassins from one of M. Bison's deadly Alpha teams. And it is from White Wolf, so as far as I'm concerned, it's official. And from this point forward, I have projected release dates from the 1994-95 White Wolf catalog. No idea if any of those dates ended up being accurate, but that's what I have to work with, so January 1995, Street Fighter Player's Guide, a 102-page softcover, which includes a lot of the weird shit that makes this game so incredibly charming. Most notably, 3 new unique backgrounds: animal hybrids, cybernetics, and elementals. So you can finally have that T-Hawk versus Cyborg Lizard Man fight as depicted in the core rules. And I did cover cybernetics in my initial review, but if people are interested in hearing more information about the other 2, I'm not against going over them at some point in the future. There are also 2 new styles, Savate and Ninjutsu, which is kinda like a Japanese version of Spanish Ninjutsu, with 1 fighter representing each of the new styles, as well as a clan heritage background to go with Ninjutsu. And notably here, Savate is the only fighting style in the entire game that provides a mechanical benefit, dealing +1 damage on kicks and +1 soak when interrupted while performing a kick, which is a very weird that it only happened once type situation. And then to go with the new backgrounds and styles, 5 new punch maneuvers, 4 new kick maneuvers, 7 new grab maneuvers, 7 new athletics maneuvers, and 29 new focus maneuvers, as well as new bite, claw, and tail slash basic maneuvers for the animal hybrids. Although notably, 8 of those special maneuvers are exclusively for animal hybrids, 21 for elementals, and 8 for ninja. There is also one maneuver that is exclusive to Savant, but it is also a prerequisite for another maneuver which is available to other styles because, you know, White Wolf. What is this editing you speak of? An all-new character type, the Manager, who basically gets more points for abilities and backgrounds and fewer for techniques and maneuvers, and lack a fighting style, only having access to the common maneuvers. Because I guess they realized, hey, we made a game in which you can only make a trained fighter. As well as additional rules for managers and other additional support staff, plus information on fighter teams and stables, including rules for team combos, which is a pretty good thing to include because if this game has one fault, it is the strong focus on one-on-one combat in a medium that needs to be engaging for multiple people at the same time. As well as an example stable containing 1 manager and 10 fighters, some of which are close to player character level. Rules for arenas and tournaments, including expanded rules for the arena background, and information on finding, training with, or becoming a master. Also a new management talent, bookie and publicist skills, and cybernetics knowledge, as well as some standees. Then March 1995, The Perfect Warrior, a 60-page softcover which is a 5-chapter adventure intended for slightly to moderately experienced Street Fighter characters. Yeah, that is a slight issue with non-level based games. It does make it a little trickier to specify for what strength of characters an adventure is appropriate, in which the players must race against an evil organization to track down and protect the last remaining master of the Majestic Crow style, including 2 supporting and 7 antagonistic characters, a vision creature, and of course the Majestic Crow Kung Fu style and 1 maneuver, the legendary maneuver that the whole thing is about because, of course, 1 technique is the only thing standing between the villain and world domination, despite the fact that he and his entire group of elite henchmen can supposedly be taken down by a group of slightly to moderately experienced characters. It also includes the linguistics knowledge, which ironically is incredibly difficult to read, plus 2 battle maps and some standees. But on to April 1995, and kinda the final Street Fighter the Storytelling game release, Contenders, a 126-page softcover which, aside from being tied with Perfect Warrior for the most 90s cover, contains 41 fighters of varying but generally high level, unfortunately not including any of the ones on the cover, but some highlights do include Sauron, Sassy Cyborg, Jackson Briggs, and The Thing That Should Not Be. And then some other characters that don't really make sense, like a couple rockers and a fight groupie who was for some reason determined important enough to have an entire character sheet with almost nothing on it instead of just the condensed NPC sheet. And okay, I guess it makes sense that a fight manager or reporter would be in the supporting cast section, but why is Ragtag put under fighting teams? Why is Green Ninja and Zen Monk under supporting cast? Also, what's up with this guy who has maxed physical stats, nearly maxed techniques, and no maneuvers? I know. It's pointless asking why White Wolf did anything the way they did, so I will just categorize these to the best of my abilities and move on. There are 9 new styles, notably Jiu-Jitsu, which is the only style with a prerequisite requiring 2 dots in grab and athletics, but giving the break, fall, and throw maneuvers for free, and Jeet Kune Do, which allows fighters to learn any maneuver for the cost of the highest listed price, +1. And as someone who loves to nitpick layout, I would just like to point out that the arrangement of the style descriptions and their maneuver lists here is just horrendous. Anyway, then there are 2 new grab maneuvers, 2 new athletics maneuvers, and 2 new focus maneuvers. Yeah, they were probably running out of ideas for maneuvers at this point. And then there are some greatly expanded weapon rules, which breaks weapons down into 12 different weapon techniques, notably not including fencing, which was the listed technique for a rapier in the core book. And also adding 3 new weapon fighting maneuvers: berserk attack, parry, and disarm. A selection of 46 weapons, some of which were already covered in the core book and are reprinted or revised here. And let's just answer that rapier question real quick by checking the table, and yeah, it's not like it's the only weapon that's missing a technique, because, as mentioned, White Wolf, editing? What? It's just very inconveniently also the only one where that's really in question. But for my purposes, I'm just going to assume that in general, the weapon rules here override the ones in the core rules. Although it is not specified if throwing hats should now use the thrown weapon technique or continue using athletics. I'm going to say athletics because that just encourages more people to use the sharpened throwing hat. And then 4 arena settings in which you can round 1 fight. Which brings us to June 1995, and the timeline in which Shadows over Mexico was actually released. A Shadowloo sourcebook for Mexico and Central America. Armed insurrections, guerrilla warfare, extortion, smuggling, and kidnapping are only a few of the weapons Shadowloo employs in its quest to control Central America. Here, M. Bison's organization operates openly, taking what it wants and crushing all who oppose it. Includes several new villains and 4 adventures based on Shadowloo's ruthless agenda for domination. A thing that we on the internet only really know about because someone happened to spot this reference to it in an old White Wolf catalog, which is why digitizing and archiving everything is so important, even ads and catalogs. So those are the actual and planned releases for Street Fighter: The Storytelling Game, a series of 5 books, a GM screen with adventure booklet, and 1 official article, bringing the totals up to 31 abilities, 9 talents, 11 skills, and 11 knowledges, 14 backgrounds, 6 unarmed combat techniques, 15 basic maneuvers, 26 fighting styles with 189 special maneuvers, including 31 punches, 28 kicks, 7 blocks, 35 grabs, 28 athletics, and 60 focus maneuvers, 13 weapon techniques and 56 weapons, 136 characters of various types and usefulness, all 16 world warriors, well, though I guess technically there was 1 more by the time the game actually came out, but maybe the licensing deal only included those 16. 88 additional fighters, 20 minions, and 12 other miscellaneous characters. And of course, most importantly, forklift operation and combat rules. And if I had one major complaint about this game as a series, okay, it would still be that you have to buy Jump, but other than that, this game provides a lot of content for a really good versus mode. If you want to just pick a couple fighters and go at it, they've got you covered with like 80 moderately above average characters who aren't really good for much else. Because after the core book and Secrets of Shadowloo, they just kind of stopped giving you lower level enemies that you can use in your own game. Maybe Shadows over Mexico would have fixed that? Maybe it wouldn't. Who knows? Like, the combat system is the big draw here, so even as just a tabletop hand-to-hand combat simulator, it is fantastic. But overall, I feel that while they did a really good job of adapting Street Fighter into a tabletop game, mechanically, they seem to have really struggled to adapt it narratively. The same struggle faced by Street Fighter the movie, Street Fighter the animated series, and Street Fighter the comic book, It is very difficult to take a piece of media based entirely around a fighting tournament and make it about anything else without cutting out most of that tournament fighting element. But for whatever reason, this game chose to put a lot of focus mechanically on the tournament fighting aspect, with official ranked matches, honoring glory scores, etc., while also providing a narrative that you were supposed to be thwarting Shadowloo's schemes for world domination. Two things that are not easy to focus on at the same time. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if part of why Shadows over Mexico got cancelled was just because it wasn't meeting the expectations they had for it. As much as I love this game, it's hard to not notice that it kind of feels like they were already running on fumes by the time Contenders came out and didn't really have a clear direction in which to expand. So I guess that's it for Street Fighter. Oh wait, there's actually still a lot of time left in the video. That's odd. Well, I guess I could find some other things to talk about. Let's see. There was an adventure published in the fall 1995 issue of Adventures Unlimited, Shadows of the Forest, which contained ninjas and giant robots, which is, not really that odd for this game, as well as a few more periodicals that I have found references to covering this game in some way, but I do not have access to, so I can't really comment on. Oh, and obviously we can't forget July 1996 and Combat, a sourcebook for World of Darkness that adapts the combat system from Street Fighter the storytelling game for your angsty vampires and werewolves. If you are a World of Darkness fan, it is definitely worth checking out as a significantly better combat system to the base one that, kinda exists. And if you are a Street Fighter the storytelling game fan, it is definitely worth checking out to see how they both simplified and complicated the system, given that instead of trained martial artist versus trained martial artist in a game built around this specific combat system, the rules now need to cover werewolf versus wizard in a whole series of pre-existing semi-compatible games. And I will just briefly go over some of the differences here. Since it is intended to be dropped into an existing game, you get power points based on your ranks in athletics, brawl, do, a thing from mage, and dodge, which can then only be spent on maneuvers in those relevant categories. So basically, if you make a combat-focused character, you're going to get more points that you will need for maneuvers. But if you make a non-combat focused character, you will get less points, because you won't really need as many. Which is a nice change from Street Fighter, where combat-focused characters only got 7 points, and non-combat focused characters were an afterthought at best. They've also changed the base maneuvers a bit to just a quick and heavy strike and kick, sprint, block, grapple, and they actually explain what the base grapple does. Street Fighter did not. And also added dodge, because you can dodge in the base World of Darkness rules, and saying, oh, by the way, you can't dodge anymore in the new combat system might have been a little awkward. And then bite, claw rake, and claw slash if you have the necessary equipment to perform those moves. Styles aren't as much of a thing anymore, they are there, but more in the optional territory, which is good because there's also a somewhat limited number of maneuvers compared to Street Fighter, 96 total versus 116. Keeping in mind that many of the maneuvers are only available to characters who happen to have fangs, claws, or specific magic powers. But the biggest difference here is that you still roll in this one. A lot. So instead of your speed just being equal to dexterity plus the maneuver bonus, you roll your wits plus alertness plus maneuver bonus, and then the number of successes is your initiative. Instead of attacks hitting automatically, you have to roll your dexterity plus the relevant ability, brawl, athletics, etc. to hit, which also means that maneuvers now have accuracy modifiers. And damage is rolled with just strength plus maneuver bonus because there are no technique scores to add to it. But the lack of techniques also means that at times the distinction between a punch and a kick can be a little meaningless. if you have Heavy Strike with +1 damage and Quick Kick with +1 damage and initiative, there isn't really any benefit to using Heavy Strike since you won't have more dots in Punch than you do in Kick. Basically, they simplified the storyteller system for Street Fighter, but then had to complicate the Street Fighter system to reintegrate it back into the base storyteller system. However, despite the issues, it is still better than the base storyteller combat, and it is a little unfortunate that it never caught on, because if it did, then future World of Darkness titles could have included specific combat maneuvers for like demons and hunters, and hunters specifically would have been able to use this system really well by presenting special techniques that hunters could use to best their physically superior opponents. And, I do still have some time, so I guess I could talk about the Brazilian re-release. Yeah, February, March, and May 1999, Drago Brazil Especial 9, 11, and 13. Which was, dead serious here, the entire core rulebook translated into Portuguese and published in 3 special issues of a Brazilian RPG magazine, and then later released as a single volume that I have seen referenced as being Especial 24. And please keep in mind here that for this part of the video, I am going off of research I did on 20-plus-year-old magazines in a language that I do not speak. So I do not know if any changes have been made from the previous version because, as I said, I do not speak Portuguese, and honestly, if I did, I wouldn't want to compare 2 complete rulebooks section by section searching for any small changes. However, I do happen to know some errors in the original Street Fighter book, as well as things that just would not be true in 1999, so it wasn't too hard to check on some of those. So, boxing will be included in a future book, which I guess is technically true this time. Special maneuvers for animal companions will be presented in later supplements, which they never were, and the last official supplement came out almost 4 years ago at this point. Headbutt hold is missing its cost in the Kabaddi maneuver list, inconsistent point cost for Drunken Monkey Roll on the Kung Fu maneuver list, and basically all of the missing and inconsistent point costs seem to have made it into this version intact. However, they did fix jumping shoulder butt being listed as jumping headbutt in the boxing maneuver list. Don't know why of all things that is one that they actually fixed, but overall it does seem like this translation is faithful to a fault. However, there is one notable difference here: the art. While some of the more official-looking art is still used, all of the edgy 90s comic book style art has been replaced with, honestly, more appropriate anime-style illustrations. So, no chainsaw hands or Zangief fighting a wizard, but it does have some interesting elements of its own. And Drago Brazil did publish some other content for the game, notably issues 56 and 57 contained Fighter's Blood, which is a dual system adventure for Street Fighter the storytelling game, and 3D&T, a system I had never actually heard of before and now kind of want to look into just because of some of the very interesting content this magazine was producing for it, including an entire previous Street Fighter game. And for Street Fighter the storytelling game, Fighter's Blood added the Aikido style, but not the Aikido style from Contenders, a completely different version of Aikido with a handful of new maneuvers that are unique to this article. And it also includes the character Rose, along with her soul power style and a handful of maneuvers from Secrets of Shadowloo and one new one, which raises some very interesting questions about what is and is not official content here, because technically this content is from the same publisher as the core book, just only in Brazil. And then issue 90, which provides stats for M. Bison, Vega, and Sagat along with their styles and almost all of the maneuvers from Secrets of Shadowloo. And then, as I said, they did also publish some other stuff, but that's it for my coverage of the official Brazilian content. And a huge thanks to the commenter who just kind of offhandedly mentioned the 1999 Brazilian release of this game, on my original Street Fighter video, sending me on this whole stupid journey into the world of Brazilian gaming magazines. And that is it for Street Fighter the Storytelling Game, a game that lasted less than a year, got converted into a poorly received World of Darkness supplement, was republished in a Brazilian gaming magazine, and then somehow found a community of dedicated fans via the internet. And even more so than other games I've covered in this series, there is no chance of this one ever crawling its way back out of the grave, seeing as how Capcom is much more careful about their licensing these days, and also White Wolf doesn't exactly, exist anymore. However, it is also one that has a very dedicated fan community doing their best to keep it alive 30 years after its initial release. Because, as I said in my review, while the thing it does is incredibly niche, it is still, to this day, the only game that really does that thing the way it does it. I mean, perhaps even I am working on something inspired by its elegantly complex combat system. And thank you for watching. If you enjoy my content, you can follow me on Blue Sky, Twitter, even Tumblr. Especially Tumblr. There are links in the description. And extra special thanks to my Fightin' Flail Snails, Broken Unicorn, Hasterfan, Omar Parker, Randy Mulholland, Renee D, Stephen Kramer, Toshirokuro, and Trey Adams. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos that the dark, unseen hand of the YouTube algorithm has lovingly selected for you, which I'm sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.